Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming this afternoon. People have put a lot of work into this over the last 2 years, in fact, because we were intended doing this last November, but circumstances that you know about kind of stood in the way of that. So here we are to celebrate physical function, celebrate the life and times of Duncan Ban MacIntyre. Now, we're looking for funding for this. It falls quite well under heritage and culture, but it's also got to do with pride and self-esteem. Because unfortunately, Duncan is not that well known in his own glen. And this is an attempt to remedy that. So you're all apostles once you leave here. So, one will be born in 1724, March 1724, in a place called Drumleart. And all Gaelic names is subject of controversy. It would either be the ridge of the Ore or the ridge of the Grey Top, depending on which particular scholar you're looking at. He was born there, say, in 1712 or 1724, and he lived the first 40 odd years of his life in the glen, working as a forester for a variety of different landlords, principally Earl of Godolphin, who was a great benefactor to him, and also Duke of Argyll, the third and fourth Dukes of Argyll. However, there was a big tumultuous. One of the great phrases I heard about this man was he was an exceptional man living in exceptional times. And we have Alan Weir with us today, the Professor of Scottish Literature at Glasgow. I'm told it's a unique position in the world. There's only one Professor of Scottish Literature in the UK, and certainly beyond the borders of the UK as well. So we have an authority amongst our midst. So just to give a little historical background about it, it was a tumultuous time. We had the 1789 Glorious Revolution, the overthrow of the Stuart King, the arrival of Mary and William. On top of that, you've got the Act of Union. All these are quite divisive things. And then you have the first explosion of resentment turning into armed warfare in 1715, followed by 1745, Culloden, the aftermath of Culloden, banning of tartan, banning of kilt, banning of language, banning of firearms as well. And in addition to that, roads being built, which is probably the most pernicious element in terms of the attack on Highland culture. Because the Highland glens were opened up to modern influences, and English in particular had a resurgence in the area. And that's been the situation really since the middle of the 18th century. Slow decline with attempts to remedy it, normally now by government and universities. I want to read a little bit from, Duncan's an interesting guy as well, because of all the Gaelic poets, he is probably one of the most preeminent, if not the most preeminent. And he's had 7 editions of his work published. No other Gaelic poet can claim that. And this is from a man, his signature up there, illiterate. Didn't speak a word, didn't write a word. This is the only evidence we have of him writing. And this is his D-Mob signature in 1799. So everything he wrote, everything he said, was written down for him by others, principally ministers. Luss, Lismore, Killin. And that's where this history comes from. Otherwise, we wouldn't know pictures of it. We've got an idea of what it looked like, and Ian's been prancing around earlier on there, looking a bit like Duncan Ban, not quite as Ken Speckle, but looking a bit like Duncan Ban. So, Dr. Calder in 1912, just to give you an idea of what it might have looked like and what it was like, Duncan MacIntyre was in many ways representative of the Highland Celts. A tall, fair man, in him was united a healthy, vigorous body with an alert and well-balanced mind, which was full of shrewd common sense, as his heart was full of feeling. A keen observer of nature, in his time a great traveller, expert with his weapons, fair-spoken but quick at repartee, ostentatious as far as good taste allowed, leisurely and self-possessed, fond of country and kin, full of humour, transparently simple in his poems and in his character. He added him the elements of greatness. Now, I'm not going to talk very much more, but I thought it might be useful to give you a picture of his life, what he did, the principal things which motivated him. So, he's born in 1712, 1724. He enters the army, actually, or the Argyll militia, in 1746, just in time to go with the Argyll militia to the Battle of Falkirk, not the best chosen moment. And he was fighting, although he had strongly Jacobite sympathies, he was fighting on the Hanoverian side, and it was a defeat. So the government troops were chased off the battlefield, including, probably running the fastest of them all, Duncan himself. And we have a wonderful, this is where we get to the poems and the songs coming from him, because of these experiences. He was a forester for many years, as I said, between 1746 with Think and 1767. So he finished that career at age 42, and he left to go to Edinburgh. Now, the Clouds edition of 1952 is a wonderful description of Duncan and where he lived. The Bard of Glenorchy had known wild and lonely places. He lived in shillings, gamekeepers' huts. He was familiar with all phases of farm work and rural pastimes. He had observed men toiling and striving all their days, and came to the conclusion that 'tis the idle man that doth last longest. He had followed his own recipe for longevity long before he left Glenorchy, and when we rejoice it was so, for sustained poetic composition requires leisure and contemplation, and the mental concentration that weariness makes difficult. There's a wonderful story, I hope Drew's not going to repeat it, of Duncan lying with his wife, Mary Bannog, fair Mary, young fair Mary, lying in bed, and with a thatched roof hut, basically, they were living in. The water was coming through the thatch and dropped onto his arm, I think. He turned round, this illustrates it quite well, turned round to Mary and said, "The ooze is penetrating. I think we should go and fix the roof now." Normally they expect a man to be getting up and do that. Anyway, so he left Glenorchy in 1767. He went to join the Highland Guard in Edinburgh in 1767, and his first edition was published in 1768. Now, the Highland Guard, we're going to get a very good description of him from Drew Shortway, was something which he entered with the influence of the Earl of Godalming, pay 6 a day, and he was very keen to get in there. He thought this was a good opportunity of leaving what he thought was the battered Highlands and getting into something a bit less challenging. 69, when he finished doing that, not done yet, he joined the Godalming Fencibles in 1793 as a soldier at the age of 69. Served with them for 6 years, and that's the discharge paper. It's up there just now. The signature on it, that's our poster, but there is a discharge paper which we'll see later. Retired from them in 99 with a good record. Then went wandering. He'd already sold his books on his satchel. His books at that time were sold by pre-order, by and large. And for looking at his books and the number of editions there were before his death, 4,000 pre-ordered copies. So paid for before they were produced. He then went wandering with a satchel with his books, and he was in this area in 1804 when the next edition came out, and he was selling that himself with his wife, wandering around, came on foot, wandered around the area on foot. He was in Clachan Desert, he was in Ochtermully, he was in Barron, and we did in Blackthorn before he set off further down. And well known, got to Benderloch at one point. School was closed for the afternoon because he was such a well-known individual. The children came out and thronged him. So he was well known, and everybody went and recognised the two of them wandering together. It was a wonderful, wonderful image of early 18th century Scotland. I've said enough, actually. He dies in 1812, although in his retirement before that, 1804 onwards, the Duke of Bern and Godwin have supported him. Now, we're going on to the next piece, which is remembering it. Alan, what is the next piece you're going to tell me?
Traditional music.
From the Whistleblinkers. Symphony are playing now, and the Whistleblinkers after that. Thank you.
Duncan Ban's wife.
This will be followed by Loch Etive Side, a place Duncan knew well, and the last tune in this set is The Hills of Glenorchy. This tune is played by the Northumberland Pipers, and it is thought to have been taken to that area by the workers at the Bonor furnace in Tynot. The Gaelic words speak of beating the oak to dye cloth. This was a subsidiary industry in the making of charcoal, used to make iron at that time.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Alan Rea. I'm Professor of Scottish Literature at the University of Glasgow. It's an enormous pleasure and privilege to be doing this, to be listening to these musicians and to the pipers just like. Hugh McDermott has a poem where he refers to bagpipe music. He says there's a wailing in their merriment and cruelty in their triumph. I love bagpipe music because it's such a challenge all the time. It's wonderful. In 2012, 200 years after the death of Duncan Ban MacIntyre, I made an English version of his greatest poem, Praise of Bendoran. And we'll say a little bit more about it, but we thought it would be a good idea to begin by letting you hear a little bit of this poem. First in Gaelic by my friend Morag, who will recite it for us. And I'll read two small passages from the poem in my English version. But first the Gaelic, the original, the opening of the poem, Praise of Bendoran.
Yn ddwrwm hargabau ag bendorau, dyn y chwna mi ffordd glein sy'n boboi chylawn.